Layton Simon is a man of many nicknames. We've seen his name spelled Layton as well as Ladon. According to Michigan court records, there's a Layton Ray Simons. Some refer to him as Layton the Beast Simon. Others refer to him as Layton Dog Simon. Some call him OG Layton Simon. Eric E.D. Boyd has referred to him as Boogeyman. D Meeks from the 50 Boys says back in the day, Layton had a devil on the back of his Jeep and referred to himself as the devil's son-in-law. This video will provide information on Layton Simon's life and how he earned many of these nicknames. Eric Kofi-Abrefa plays Lamar Silas in the Starz television series BMF. Lamar is a fictional character based on Layton Simon. Layton Simon was born on January 6, 1957 in Detroit, Michigan. During an interview with Vlad TV, Layton reveals that he grew up in a household with both his parents, and including himself, there were 5 kids, his brother, and he has 3 sisters. Layton's father worked for Ford and eventually also sold drugs. Layton's mother was a saleswoman at Fisher's in Lincoln Park. She sold dresses. Layton's mother didn't want him selling drugs, but told him if he would be selling drugs, she didn't want any snitches in their house. When Layton was about 8 years old, he traveled down south using his mother's car, where he got his hands on a shotgun. One day back at home in Detroit, Layton heard his mother scream and found her being beat up by 2 drug addicts, one named Claude Rawlings and another guy whose last name was Wet Bear. The drug addicts were known for robbing and killing their victims. The drug addicts were holding Layton's mother, and when Layton approached, they let her go. One of the drug addicts called Layton out of his name, and Layton got extremely upset. Layton had the shotgun and told his mother to move out of his way so he could shoot the drug addicts. Layton's mother refused to get out of the way. Layton explains that if his mother would have moved out the way, he definitely would have shot one of, if not both of the drug addicts. Layton's father brought up this incident about 50 years after it happened. The incident gave Layton confidence, proving to himself that he was a gangster. During his interview with Vlad TV, Layton reveals that he was arrested for the first time when he was about 8 or 9 years old during the 1967 riots in Detroit. According to Layton, the riots started on 12th Street at the Blind Pig when police started beating up black people. Layton explains that he stole some hats from a store during the 1967 riots. The Michigan National Guard were doing stops, and the last patrol car stopped Layton, and he was caught with about 20 stolen hats. According to the Detroit Free Press, Conrad Mallett Jr., the future Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, was a 13-year-old Detroit Free Press paperboy on 12th Street on the morning of Sunday, July 23, 1967. And he states, "I saw a guy come out of a clothing store with 10 hats on his head." Literally in a stack. That could have been Layton. Layton was arrested for looting and explains that he was locked up in a jail on wheels for a short period of time before being released. In an interview with the Original Gangsters podcast, Layton Simon explains that he loved playing baseball growing up. One day in the 1970s, Layton was on his way to baseball practice, but decided to pull an Allen Iverson by skipping practice and heading over Chubby's house, one of his friends. Chubby lived on Avery and Warren, down the street from the 20 Grand. Layton explains that at the time, Chubby's brother, Harold Stinson, had about 40 houses. When Layton arrived at Chubby's house, he met a guy named Dirty Diamond Dirt, who was wearing a ring that Layton thought was 20 carats. At the time, Layton thought the ring was worth about $200,000, but about 10 years later, Layton won the ring from Dirty Diamond Dirt in a pool game and found out that the ring was worth $400,000 because the diamond was nearly flawless. Layton knew of Harold Stinson before meeting Dirty Diamond Dirt, but asking Dirty Diamond Dirt about Harold Stinson is what eventually led Layton to being introduced to Harold Stinson. Harold Stinson is Chubby's brother. When Layton met Harold Stinson, Harold was selling heroin, which was imported during the Vietnam War. Layton watched Harold Stinson make $200,000 to $300,000 per day. Layton was 14 when he started selling drugs with Harold Stinson. Layton spent a lot of time boxing in the neighborhood, shooting pool, and hustling near a pool hall in E-Course on 18th Street. Layton would make about $15,000 to $20,000 per day just opening bags for Harold Stinson. Layton explains that when you open bags, your fingers get numb. This made Layton anxious to get to the next level of drug selling, but Harold Stinson's brother wouldn't let him. In the early 1970s, Harold Stinson bought his whole crew Cadillacs. Layton didn't let Harold buy him a Cadillac. Layton eventually bought a 1972 Lincoln Town Car when he was about 15 years old. At the time, Layton didn't even have a license. Layton gave his dad $5,000 to buy the Lincoln Town Car. At the time, the MSRP on Lincoln Town Cars was about $7,000. Layton explains that he would have given his dad all the cash to buy the town car, but he wanted to build his credit. Layton explains that Harold Stinson and Walter Cason grew up together. Walter Cason was in the drug game 5 to 10 years before Harold Stinson. Harold never worked for Cason. Layton came up in the 1970s under Walter the Black Fox Cason. Cason controlled the drug trade in southwest Detroit. The Gangster Report explains that Cason oversaw a vast distribution network in the 1970s on the city's southwest side, which includes downriver communities, E-Course, Inkster, Willow Run, and River Rouge. According to Layton, Cason went to prison, and as soon as he got out, he overpowered the 50 Boyz, which included the Flannery Brothers, Big Meech, and Southwest T. After Cason overpowered the 50 Boyz, Cason bought himself a Mercedes-Benz and a Range Rover. Cason was released from prison on October 30th, 2015, when he was 67 years old. The first time Cason went to prison was in 1978, when his nephew / #1 enforcer, Bobby Marshall, became a federal witness confessing to 2 gangland murders and testifying against Cason and several of the organization's employees. When Cason went away in 1978, Layton took over the Southside Territory. Layton Simon controlled the drug trade in southwest Detroit throughout the 1980s and the early 1990s. In the late 1980s, early 1990s, Layton started beefing with Big Meech, Southwest T, and the 50 Boyz, who would eventually become BMF. Cason was released in 1989. In 1990, Cason was incarcerated for a second time. Cason fell prey to a DEA sting operation. A female undercover agent infiltrated Cason's crew and became his girlfriend. Cason was convicted for heading another drug conspiracy and was slammed by the judge as a repeated offender, and ended up serving 19 years in federal custody. Layton explains that he would see the woman Cason was dating, who ended up being an informant. Cason dated the informant for about 10 years. Cason is now 75 years old and he is still alive. Harold Stinson was Cason's second in command. Harold Stinson and Walter Cason eventually had a falling out, and Layton started working with Harold Stinson more than he worked with Walter Cason. Layton explains that the beef between Walter Cason and Harold Stinson started after Walter Cason's nephew, Bobby Marshall, slapped Harold Stinson's sister, Linda Stinson. Bobby Marshall, Walter Cason's nephew, was dating Linda Stinson, Harold's sister, and people knew this wasn't a good idea because they both talked too much. One day at one of Layton's friends' houses, Marshall and Linda Stinson started arguing over who had more money between Walter Cason and Harold Stinson. "My brother's making more money than your uncle." "No, he's not," the two argued. The argument eventually got serious, and Marshall slaps Linda Stinson. Linda Stinson told Bobby Stinson that Marshall slapped her. After finding out that Marshall slapped Linda, Harold and Bobby Stinson went to a club called Electric House searching for Marshall and Walter Cason. Harold and Bobby Stinson couldn't find Marshall and Walter Cason, but they found Alfred Cason and approached him about the incident. Alfred Cason was a beast, according to Layton. So when Bobby Stinson approached him, Alfred Cason shot Bobby Stinson in the head, and Bobby Stinson died. This is how the beef between Walter Cason and Harold Stinson started. Alfred Cason shot and killed Bobby Stinson after Alfred Cason was approached about Marshall, Walter Cason's nephew, slapping Linda Stinson, who was Harold Stinson's sister. As discussed previously, coincidentally, Marshall, Walter Cason's nephew and number one enforcer, would end up becoming a federal witness and snitching on Walter Cason. Marshall confessed to 2 gangland murders and testified against his uncle, Walter Cason. As a result, Walter Cason was incarcerated in 1978. On December 13, 1973, at the Name of the Game bar located at 2137 South 4th Street, Detroit, Michigan 48217, about a month after Alfred Cason murdered Bobby Stinson, Harold Stinson runs into Walter Cason's brother, William Cason. Harold Stinson and William Cason start arguing, and Harold Stinson shoots and kills William Cason. The Cason vs Stinson beef was starting to die down, but it was reignited after Harold Stinson murdered William Cason. When Walter Cason and Harold Stinson started beefing, Layton started working with Harold Stinson more than he worked with Walter Cason. On July 1st, 1977, David Charles Johnson, hired by Walter Cason, follows Harold Stinson from UBQ to Harold Stinson's house located at 20107 Marlowe Street, Detroit, Michigan 48235. Detectives believe Stinson had killed William Cason, but because none of the witnesses in the bar cooperated in the investigation, the case was closed when Stinson was killed. Cason and Johnson, who was also arraigned before visiting Recorder's Court. Judge Robert P. Van Wiemersch faced a preliminary examination on November 16, 1979. This marks the second murder charge filed in 1 week against Cason, apparently because of a federal DEA investigation into Cason's activities. Cason was arrested on Monday and charged with the January 21st, 1977 murder of Lisa Radford, who was 21 years old at the time of her death. Her body was found dumped on Beverly Road in Romulus. Cason had been free on a $200,000 cash bond since June, when he was one of 26 persons charged on a 44-count drug conspiracy indictment. Besides being charged with conspiracy and delivery of narcotics, Cason is charged with operating a continuing criminal enterprise, the only federal narcotics charge that carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 12 years in prison and a $100,000 fine. Radford was believed to be a drug courier for Cason, who was angry with him because she had not been paid for a trip. Officials say Cason made several trips to Nevada to arrange drug purchases, but he always would have others smuggle the drugs for him. Miss Radford threatened to expose Cason's drug dealing activities. She was shot once in the head. Although Cason has been a target of federal and local drug enforcement for several years, he has been arrested only a few times for drug possession. Police records show Cason was convicted once and served a 90-day sentence at the Detroit House of Corrections in 1970 for possession. Johnson has a 4-page criminal record that includes arrests for fraudulent use of a credit card, forgery, and mail fraud. In 1973, Johnson was charged with a first-degree murder and was sentenced to 5 to 14 years in 1974 after he pleaded guilty to manslaughter. Layton explains that Walter Cason and Cube, Harold Stinson's brother, are now best friends. Cube started selling drugs before Harold Stinson, and Harold Stinson took it to another level. During Layton's interview with Vlad TV, he reveals that he has been involved in about 100 shootings. Layton has been shot 7 times. In the first incident, he was shot 5 times, allegedly by Edrick E.D. Boyd, as Layton watched his brother, Elvis, die. One of the 5 bullets hit Layton in his neck and nearly killed him. Layton let Big Meech go after using him as a shield and then was shot while watching Elvis die. Layton didn't turn around to see who was shooting him because he was focused on his brother, Elvis. In the second incident, Layton was shot 2 times. Layton's niece was robbed, so Layton pulled up on about 9 men that he believed were responsible. He told the men to let him search them to prove that they didn't rob his niece. 8 of the 9 men agreed, but a man named Merv refused to let Layton search him. 20 minutes later, Merv came to Layton's house and told Layton to come outside. Layton came out and Merv ran around the corner. Layton followed him but couldn't find Merv, and Layton asked someone in the area where Merv ran to. The person Layton asked lied and told Layton he didn't know which way Merv went. Merv then shot Layton from about a block away. Layton tried to shoot the guy that lied to him, but Layton's gun was out of bullets. The next day, Layton was given about $10,000 because of the incident, so Layton let the guy slide. Later, Layton saw one of the guys at a gas station, and the guy fainted. The beef between Layton and Big Meech / the 50 Boys was inherited from Edrick E.D. Boyd. Edrick had beef with Layton before the 50 Boys crew formed because Edrick took over the drug game in Layton's area by undercutting Layton's prices with 2-for-1 deals. Eventually, E.D. took over the drug game in Layton's stomping grounds, E-Course/12th Street. Walter Cason's Southwest stomping ground was where the Flannery brothers became BMF, starting their 15-year run atop the whole drug business from their humble beginnings on Edsel Street. Like Walter Cason, Big Meech became known for flaunting his status and wealth as a drug lord. Layton Simon spent 3 years in prison, from 1979 to 1982. When Layton went to prison, Walter Cason was already locked up, doing his first bid. Layton was running the drug game in E-Course before he got locked up. Layton was running an apartment across the street from the 12th Street Boys. While Simon and Walter Cason were locked up, crack took over the dope game around the country, including the Southwest Side, and a new breed of gangster arose, the 50 Boys, on the south side of Detroit on 12th Street. At the peak of the crack era, Edrick E.D. Boyd and Derek D. Meeks started taking over the dope game. In 1985, the Flannery brothers, Southwest T and Big Meech, joined E.D. and D. Meeks, forming the 50 Boys crew. Layton says Edrick E.D. Boyd asked for permission to return to the neighborhood to attend his mother's funeral. According to Layton, E.D. would ask Layton's friend Bobby Bob Beat for Layton's permission to return to the neighborhood. When E.D. didn't ask, Layton claims that he would see E.D. in a tenant car trying to hide. Al Prophet recently interviewed E.D. Boyd, who claims Layton is a liar. E.D. calls Layton out. "If you knew it was me, why didn't you engage?" E.D. says. Layton refers to E.D. as Notorious, and E.D. says Layton must have dementia because E.D. never called himself Notorious. E.D. admits that Big Meech got shot in his neck at Coney Island. In response to E.D., Layton explains that E-Course was just one dot on his board. Layton says he eventually left Detroit and would only come back because of his brother, Elvis. Layton was making more money in Dodge City, Nashville. Dodge City is where the infamous Cumberland View projects are located. Dodge City made headlines a few months ago because the Gideon Army, a popular social justice group with political clout in Nashville, claimed that their work caused crime to decrease in Dodge City. When Layton was released from prison, he immediately started beefing with the 50 Boys. On April 15, 1985, Layton attended the marvelous Marvin Hagler vs. Thomas the Hitman Hearns fight, aka The Fight, aka The War. The fight was held at the Caesars Palace Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hagler had 8-to-1 betting odds to win, but everybody from Detroit bet on Hearns, who is from Detroit. Hagler won. While Layton was watching the fight, a member of the 50 Boys crew kept purposely bumping into Layton. Layton warned the guy that if he kept bumping into him, he would do him great bodily harm. According to rumors, Big Meech and Terry Southwest T. Flannery left Detroit because they were beefing with Layton Simon. The 50 Boys caught Layton's attention in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Layton was on Electric Street, and his brother took a bag from the 50 Boys. "These 50s look like 8 balls," Layton's brother said. 12th Street. Layton couldn't believe it. The low prices interrupted Layton's business on 12th Street, an area he dominated prior to the $50 bags the Flannery brothers were selling. Layton had 12th Street, an 8-unit apartment building on the street, for about 8 years. The 50 Boys started selling in the driveway of the apartments. The 50 Boyz were connected with a cop named Sam who moved into the apartment building on 12th Street. Layton didn't want to deal with Sam, so he decided to leave 12th Street. Layton proclaims that the 50 Boyz didn't force him to leave 12th Street. He left because he decided to. The houses Layton had on Electric Street were nicknamed the Flintstone houses because the rocks were so big, according to Layton. To compete with the $50 bags the 50 Boyz were selling, Layton introduced the Flintstones. Flintstones were 8 balls of coke for $10, and Layton's coke wasn't stretched, aka double bubble. Layton claims that the 50 Boyz stretched an ounce into 2 ounces with baking soda and called it double bubble. Layton explains that on BMF, when business slowed down for the 50 Boyz, it was a reference to Layton wiping the 50 Boyz out with the Flintstones, the 8 balls that Layton sold for $10. Layton's profit margin was so large that he could afford to sell 8 balls for $10. Layton and his brother Elvis were in different worlds and didn't spend much time with each other, but Layton says Elvis was his dog. Layton tells a story about Elvis and a guy named Peanut getting into a fight in church because Peanut wanted his ring back. Peanut drew his gun on Elvis, but didn't shoot him. Layton told the story to let you know how hard-headed Elvis could be. On May 3rd, 1987, Layton's younger brother Elvis Simon was shot and killed in the parking lot of the Detroit Coney Island restaurant. Edrick E.D. Boyd shot and killed Elvis because Elvis started dating a woman named Yolanda. Yolanda is Big Meech's first baby mother. Yolanda and Big Meech have a daughter together. The beef between Edrick and Big Meech versus Elvis started because Edrick and Big Meech both previously dated Yolanda, so they weren't happy when Elvis started dating Yolanda. The character Monique, played by Cash Doll in the BMF series, is loosely based off Yolanda. Layton thinks Cash Doll looks similar to Yolanda and gives BMF a shout out for a great casting decision. Layton calls Yolanda a troublemaker and says all the females from E-Course were stack chasers. Layton tried to convince his brother Elvis to leave Yolanda alone, but Elvis wouldn't listen. Sadly, Yolanda, the mother of Big Meech's first child, passed away in 2004. On May 3rd, 1987, Elvis calls Layton over and tells him that he was thinking about going downtown to meet with Yolanda. Elvis knew it would be dangerous, so he tells Layton if he didn't return, he's most likely dead. Layton told Elvis not to go, but Elvis didn't listen. Layton was planning to open up a clothing store because he wanted to stop selling drugs and go legit. Elvis knew Layton had plans to go legit, so Elvis didn't tell Layton about his beef with Edrick and Big Meech over Yolanda. On the day of the murder, Elvis is in the parking lot of the Detroit Coney Island restaurant. Edrick and Big Meech are there along with Layton, and then Yolanda pulls up. Edrick started shooting in the parking lot of the Detroit Coney Island restaurant trying to kill Elvis. Layton used Big Meech as a shield so he didn't get shot. Big Meech told Layton to let him go, but Layton refuses. Layton doesn't get shot because Edrick doesn't want to shoot Big Meech. Layton watches Elvis get shot and killed in the parking lot of the Detroit Coney Island restaurant. In an interview with Vlad TV, E.D. says Layton was his only major beef. E.D. explains that Layton shot at his mother-in-law's house in 1988. Someone followed E.D.'s wife home because she was driving a car known to be owned by E.D. The shooter, who E.D. believes was Layton, rammed the car to try to run it off the road. E.D.'s wife calls E.D. during the incident, and E.D. sends members of his crew to the location. E.D. tells his wife to go to her mother's house. When E.D.'s wife gets to her mother's house, she runs inside, and Layton allegedly starts shooting at the house. This incident was the last straw for E.D.'s wife. E.D.'s wife feared for her life and their daughter's life. E.D. wasn't scared to die and explains that he went to the same spot to get his shoes shined every day for years, so it would have been easy for anyone, including Layton, to find him and kill him if they pleased. In response to E.D., Layton explains that he didn't used to see him every day getting his shoes shined at the same location. Layton claims that E.D. would drive around in a tinted car because he thought Layton would do him harm. Once Layton started threatening E.D.'s family members, E.D. knew it was time to get out the game. Layton denies shooting at E.D.'s wife and denies shooting up E.D.'s mother-in-law's house. Layton says he would shoot himself before shooting at a woman. Layton claims that E.D.'s wife, Lady, was basically his wife. Layton claims that E.D. called the cops on him several times. Layton says he respects Big Meech because Meech wouldn't call the cops, unlike E.D. Layton explains that he tried to shoot E.D. after he spotted E.D. in the passenger seat of a mobile home watching TV. The incident occurred 2 blocks away from Layton's mother's house. According to Layton, E.D. was with the Annabelle boys. Layton says that he was driving his Mustang 5.0 when he spotted E.D. in the mobile home, but Layton claims that he doesn't know what was wrong with his Mustang that day because he was unable to catch up with E.D.'s mobile home. According to Layton, Big Meech started bragging about murdering Elvis. Layton's nephew also got murdered, and Meech informs Layton that he didn't have anything to do with it. Bobby calls Layton and Meech together to try to end their beef. Layton warns Meech that he needs to stop messing with him because he doesn't want to be on his bad side. Layton explains that he had respect for Bobby, but Elvis was dead, so he wasn't interested in squashing beef with Meech. The next day, Layton goes to the club with a mink coat that had to be held by 2 people. Layton explains that he will go to New York for custom clothes and shoes because they were able to make them in a half hour. Layton has a pair of gaiters with alligator eyes in the front. During his interview with Vlad TV, D. Meeks explains that Layton would wear Adidas suits with gaiters. D. Meeks also explained that Layton had finger waves and a huge rope chain that came down to his waist. Layton had a pocket added to his mink coat for his Uzi so he could access the gun faster if he needed to. Layton is at the club with his wife and he spots Big Meech and his crew in the club. They ran off, according to Layton, because they were scared of him. Layton explains that Meech knew he lived on Ethel Street next to the Coney Island restaurant. Layton sees Big Meech and about 15 to 20 members of Meech's crew on Ethel Street near his house. Layton felt like Big Meech and his crew were disrespecting him by being near his house because he just warned Meech to stay away from him. After seeing Meech and his crew, Layton goes home and gets his Uzi. Layton saw 3 police officers at the mini station, but he didn't care. Layton pulls up on Meech and his crew at the Coney Island restaurant. Meech is in a Jeep and Layton empties 17 rounds trying to kill Meech. Layton couldn't see Meech because Meech was hiding under the steering wheel of his Jeep. Layton only hits Meech 1 time in the neck. Big Meech eventually leaves Detroit, relocating to Atlanta. Many believe Big Meech left because of his beef with Layton the Beast Simon and Layton's attempt to murder him. Layton explains that he never heard Meech say he left Detroit because of him, but explains that Meech probably left because of him because Layton was a nut back then. Richard Wersch Jr., aka White Boy Rick, became an informant for the FBI when he was 14 to 16 years old. White Boy Rick is played by Eminem on BMF. Wersch claims that the FBI and Detroit police groomed him to be a drug informant at the age of 14. They taught him the tricks of buying and selling drugs while providing him money, narcotics, and a fake ID. Rick's Video Palace was a video store Wersch opened up as a front for his drug business. Then the police turned on Rick in 1987 when he was 17. He was arrested for possession of cocaine. There was no intervention by the FBI and U.S. Attorney explaining that Rick was an informant from age 14 to 16. Rick was sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2017, justice campaigners publicized Rick's case and he was paroled, but directly to a Florida prison where he served another 5 years for an auto theft conviction from 2008. Rick was released in 2020, ending his 32 years behind bars, 1987 to 2020. Rick became the longest-serving nonviolent juvenile offender in Michigan history, having worked undercover for the FBI and Detroit police starting when he was 14. Rick is the youngest FBI informant in the history of this nation. In 2021, Rick filed a federal lawsuit seeking $100 million, $3 million for each year of incarceration, during which Wersch suffered anxiety, depression, and abdominal pain from an assassination attempt that ripped his colon in half when he was 15. Layton met White Boy Rick on Hamilton Street and 6 Mile Road. Layton says when he met Rick, he was driving a white Benz and was wearing chains. Layton says it was obvious that Rick was an informant because he was only 14 years old. Shout outs to the sources that helped me create this video, including Vlad TV's interview with Layton Vs Simon, Vlad TV's interview with Edrick E.D. Boyd, and Vlad TV's interview with D Meeks at _VileTown_ on Twitter. True Crime Talk with Original Gangsters podcast. They did an interview with Layton Vs Simon. The Gangster Report, founded by best-selling author Scott M. Bernstein and Al Prophet. We'll go through a couple of VileTown's tweets. The first tweet is Big Meech meeting Edrick E.D. Boyd in the mid-1980s when Big Meech was 15. Edrick was raised in New York and Meech's confidence caught his attention. The pic shows Terry Southwest T Flannery on the left, Edrick in the middle, and Meech on the right. The second tweet is E.D. nicknamed the Flannery brothers and their crew the 50 Boys because they were selling $50 bags of crack cocaine on the downriver streets of Ecorse, the bags that Layton said were as big as 8 balls. The pic shows Southwest T on the left, D Meeks in the middle, and Meech on the right. The third tweet, by the late 1980s, the 50 Boys grew to command a small network of dealers throughout southwest Detroit and a cluster of factory town suburbs, including River Rouge, Inkster, and Willow Run, as well as Ecorse. Selling at Ecorse led to friction with Layton Simon. Layton wanted to gain control of his territory after allegedly leaving a psychiatric ward in the 1980s. Beef with Demetrius, Big Meech Flannery, and Southwest T prompted Meech and Southwest T to leave Detroit. D Meeks is in the middle, stayed in Detroit, eventually making more than $1.5 million on his bike. Corey, one of the crew's lieutenants, is on the left. D Meeks is in the middle, and Southwest T is on the right. The Flannery brothers headed to California in the mid-1990s, seeking a direct connect to foreign suppliers so they could cut all the middlemen out and increase their profits. They were eventually introduced to Mexican cartel sources through California drug trafficker Wayne Waniac Joyner. The source provided the Flannery brothers with Colombian dope delivered straight from Mexico. Thanks to Waniac and the Mexican connect, the Flannery brothers began moving more weight than they could dream of. Hundreds of thousands of bricks of cocaine each month. Pure, uncut cocaine for $14,000 a kilo when bought outright. They referred to this deal as a buy, or they would pay $16,000 if they bought the bricks on consignment, a pick up now, pay later arrangement, which they referred to as a push. Meech ended up moving to Atlanta, where he oversaw operations, and Southwest T moved to California, where he oversaw the national drug ring's Los Angeles hub. Layton Simon, aka Lamar from the BMF series, had a stronghold in Detroit until the 1990s. In 2009, Sykes Sconey uploaded the Southwest Detroit anthem to YouTube. The 3:55 mark. Layton Simon, that's my dog. Till the end, rest in peace to your brother Elvis, was my man. In 2014, Sykes Sconey uploaded OG Layton Simon, which features Big Paulie. Simon makes an appearance. You can hear him speaking at the end of the video. Rest in peace, Sykes Sconey.
The main one that had it, we put him in the trunk to find out how they achieved their size and shit. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to mention no names though, but we put him in the trunk. They were first called the crack, like, I feel comfortable, shit. Our 05 was like a half a thing, you know what I'm saying? Theirs came out there with 3. I felt like my mother over there, my brother showed me the whole thing of that shit, man.
Eight balls is unheard of.
Right.
Let me ask you this. When you lost your brother,